Now I know that Kiss does not exactly have the best reputation on the internet. As much as I and many others love them, there's a huge population of people who hate everything that Kiss stand for. And there's some good reasons for that. Gene Simmons can never seem to keep his trap shut and always finds some new and interesting way to insert his foot into his mouth. And trying to copyright the horns? Gene, that's despicable, even for you. Paul Stanley's voice in recent years has also gone to tatters. Christ, I promise never to make fun of David Lee Roth's fucked voice ever again. And the fact that they have Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer practically play the parts of original members Ace Frehley and Peter Criss on stage and on record is something that I find quite heinous myself. And the members also seem to have out-of-control egos, enough to the point where they'll make an interviewer change his shirt just because it said Iron Maiden on it and not Kiss.
Kiss is K-I-S-S. This does not spell kiss. Gustavo.
But that's stuff that's only really become apparent in recent years. And before that, people still hated Kiss. But why was that? I guess it all comes down to their gimmick. The makeup, the costumes, the stage shows, the goddamn pyro. And a lot of people didn't like that because it wasn't about the music, man. But here's the thing, if the music wasn't as good as it is, then the band would have never have taken off to begin with. And it's kind of funny that some of Kiss's most avid haters worship bands who are actually influenced by Kiss. So that's pretty fucking ironic. And that's for a pretty damn good reason. If you got into Kiss as a small child, then they weren't just a band to you, they were fucking superheroes. Each member had their own identity, and they were very easy to tell apart. And each member had their own fan base, not unlike one of the band's biggest influences, the Beatles. Now sure, that can only really be said for the original lineup, but still, even members like Eric Carr, Vinnie Vincent, and Bruce Kulick have their fair share of fans. Kiss are by no means the best band of all time, you'd have to be a pretty big Kiss nerd to go that far, but I would argue that they are almost underrated because there's a shit ton of great material within their 20 studio album career, with several switches in their lineup, style, and even genre. Kiss are more prolific than you probably realize. Sure, there's also some not-so-great material to be found, but that's almost expected when you have a number of albums that go into the double digits. And if the shit that comes from Gene Simmons' mouth actually stop you from checking out Kiss's music and giving it a fair shot, but I'm sorry, then you're not a music fan. If you let politics dictate what you like and dislike, then you're a poser, I'm sorry. I'm by no means saying it to like Kiss, I understand they are not for everybody. But just like any other band, they're worth at least giving a shot. But anyway, today I decided to rank all of Kiss's studio albums from worst to best. Now keep in mind that this is only my opinion, and my own personal ranking list will probably change day by day. So by all means, leave your own Kiss top 10 albums, best to worst, top 5, whatever you want to do. Leave that in the comments, I'd love to read it. Also, there will be no live albums, so the live series of records will be absent, though the first two are indeed great, and the Unplugged album is pretty good as well. And none of the solo albums either, even though the Ace Frehley 78 solo album is low-key the best album with the Kiss logo on it. You're damn right I said it. But anyway, I digress. On to the ranking, and oh boy, these first few albums will not be pretty. Fucking Christ, this album. No Kiss album is quite the chore to listen to that Hot in the Shade is. You can probably tell this album came out in the CD age because it's got way too many songs. No Kiss album needs to be 15 songs long and clock in at nearly an hour. And out of those 15 songs, none of them are good. Some are okay, sure, but most of them are nails on a chalkboard and are irritating to the senses. This is mainly because in order to give this album a quote, rawer sound, they decided to record this album with a super low budget for some bizarre reason. And because of this, they pretty much just used the demos for this album. Sure, they added a couple of overdubs here or there, but it's still just the demos at the end of the day. You can polish a turd all you want, but it's still gonna be a fucking turd. I understand this was done because their previous record, Crazy Nights, was very much overproduced, but just taking the demos and releasing them pretty much as is a gross overcorrection. Sure, lo-fi production can sound good for some bands, especially in the world of punk and extreme metal, but Kiss are not one of those bands. And even then, this album doesn't sound so much lo-fi as it sounds downright prehistoric. Hell, some songs of the album were recorded with goddamn drum machines. Talk about a slap in the face to Eric Carr, and this is the last Kiss album he ever played on before he passed away 2 years later. And he deserved a way better send-off than this album. He doesn't even play drums on the entire thing. Worst tracks are plentiful, like Cadillac Dreams, Silver Spoon, and Read My Body, probably the worst Kiss song ever put to tape. And it's a shameless ripoff of Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me, another shitty song. So if you rip off a shitty song, what are you gonna get? Another shitty fucking song! Best tracks? There really isn't any. You Love Me to Hate You is kind of catchy, I guess. Forever is an okay ballad. The song Little Caesar has lead vocals provided by Eric Carr himself, and I guess it's the highlight, but even that track isn't that great either. But it isn't terrible either, so that's something. Crazy Nights is perhaps one of the most overproduced albums of all time. And I don't think I like a single song. Some songs are not as bad as others, sure, but I wouldn't say there's any winners to be found on this record. I debated putting this album at the very bottom, because I actually despise listening to this album much more than Haunt in the Shade, but I decided to put this album a tad bit higher because there are less songs to be found, and they actually sound like they kind of tried, unlike the previous record. This album is known in some circles as Kiss Jovi, because, well, they're trying to be Bon fucking Jovi. The overly glossy production, keyboards up the ass, very commercial songwriting, I mean, it's all there. Also, during this period, Paul was trying his best to be David Lee Roth. His stage raps during the 80s are the stuff of legendary cringe.
Guys, how many of you guys like to get licked? You lick me, I lick you.
What are you, fucking gay?
When it comes to the worst tracks, throw a fucking dart. You've got Bang Bang You. It's like if Love Gun was written by a fucking virgin. You have the chorus retardation of When Your Walls Come Down, and another candidate for the worst Kiss song of all time, it's gotta be fucking My Way. What were they thinking?
What were they thinking? What were they thinking?
What were they thinking?
It's the worst kind of pump you up motivational song you'll ever hear. It sounds like it has a spot on the soundtrack of one of the shitty Rocky movies. And Paul's vocals get really annoying by the end. I swear, he put his nuts in a fucking vice grip in order to get his voice that high. Best tracks? I guess Thief in the Night isn't too bad. I have a bit of a soft spot for Reason to Live, not gonna lie, no homo. But No, I would say is the best track, because it's the only song to actually have some energy behind it, and it isn't totally kneecapped by the ass-ramming keyboards. Now, Sonic Boom came out after an 11-year gap from their last studio album, Psycho Circus. Now, was it worth a whole decade wait? Oh god, no! This album isn't even worth an 11-week wait. It's basically Kiss trying their best to relive their glory days of the 70s, but it's a far cry from Rock and Roll Over, I can assure you. First off, this is the first Kiss album to feature Tommy Thayer on guitar, and look, he's by no means a bad player. He has his moments. Hell, I even like a couple of Black and Blue songs. I don't hate the guy at all. And I can't blame him for taking the gig. If he didn't take the gig, someone else would have. But on this album, he's trying his best to sound like Ace Frehley, and it falls very flat. Eric Singer's drumming is also very scaled back compared to his previous work in order to sound more like Peter Criss, which is also really lame. But maybe the worst thing about this album is Paul Stanley's rapidly deteriorating voice. Now, it definitely gets worse on Monster, but this is the first album that Paul's voice really starts to suck. I mean, the bridge in Modern Day Delilah is just plain cringeworthy, I'm sorry. Ew. The songwriting is also not up to par of the 70s material that they are already drawing heavily from. In the 70s, we had songs like I Want You and Cold Gin and Nothing to Lose. But on this album, we have trite like Russian Roulette, Nobody's Perfect, Hot and Cold, Stand, motherfucking Danger Us. Jesus Christ, guys, Danger Us is heinously anus. Also, the production is way too sterile for a 70s style hard rock album. There should be some piss and vinegar in there, but this album just sounds way too clean. The best tracks are probably Modern Day Delilah and Say Yeah. but even those songs aren't that great. Now we finally have an album that isn't total garbage, Monster. I'm not saying it's great, it's not, far from it, but it doesn't make me want to rip my foreskin off like the previous album, so that's an improvement. Now Monster will probably be the band's final studio effort since they're now on their second farewell tour. Now is it a good way to cap off their career? Now they could have definitely done worse, but they also could have definitely done better. It's a step up from Sonic Boom, but that's not really saying much. Even though it's better than the album that preceded it, it still suffers from a lot of the same problems. Like the band is still trying way too hard to recapture the glory days of Kiss, Paul's expired voice gives me ear aids, and the production, Jesus Christ, the production. Whoever produced this album needs to Oh, of course. And improvements of this album would be that Tommy Thayer copies Ace's style considerably less. Now granted, he should have never done it to begin with, but still, he fixed the problem. Sonic Boom had some laughable songs like Danger Us and Stand, whereas Monster is much more solid. Even though there's songs like Eat Your Heart Out, which is just flat out annoying, a Take Me Down Below, which is really gross because it's a sex song written by creepy old men. But at the same time, we have songs like Freak and Back to the Stone Age, which are both two really solid songs for a band this long in the tooth. And even though Tommy singing about space pisses me off to no end, Out of This World is actually a pretty good tune. But the album has a hard time getting momentum. As soon as we have a decent track, we have one or two songs that are mediocre to bad. So I have a hard time recommending it unless you're a total Kiss fanatic. Carnival of Souls is considered the grunge album because, well, fucking listen to it. And don't get it twisted, because I'm not a grunge hater. I love Alice in Chains, Nirvana, L7, and the Melvins as much as the next guy. Only the thing is, Carnival of Souls is less Houdini and more hungry for stink. It's not exactly top tier. And that's because Paul and Gene were very much involved with trying to get the original lineup of the band back together for the reunion tour for a good portion of the recording sessions, so they weren't as involved as they should have been, so a lot of the weight was actually put on the other members of the band and producer Toby Wright. Hell, Bruce Kulick plays bass on half the album. That's how uninvolved Paul and Gene were. But with that being said, it does have some good tracks like Hate, Master and Slave, Jungle, I Confess, and Seduction of the Innocent, which is pretty outside the box for Kiss of all bands, but it is really enjoyable. Though weak and unmemorable material do kind of fill the album, and much of it goes in one ear and out the other, and none of the songs are what I would call outright bad, but none of them are exactly amazing either. But don't get me wrong, it does have some good cuts here or there. Revenge might just be the most overrated Kiss album of all time. Of all fucking time. Now this album is not really bad, it actually has some good stuff on it, but some people seem to put this album on a pedestal as not only the best Kiss album without makeup, but one of the best Kiss albums ever. And I just can't agree with either of those statements. I think a lot of people give this album so much props because of the opening track and lead single, Unholy. Now make no mistake, it's a great song and a classic of Kiss's career, but no other song on this album even comes close to matching it. The closest it gets is tracks like Tough Love, Thou Shalt Not, and Heart of Chrome, which are ripping songs, definitely, but they don't even really compare. There's also Trite, like the power ballad Every Time I Look at You, which is about 4 years too late, so is dated even for the time. Spit and I Just Wanna that make me lose brain cells. And Domino is just plain and simple creepy and disturbing.
It's a sticky situation if she ain't old enough to vote.
There's also God Gave Rock and Roll to You, which is pretty much a tribute to Eric Carr, who died just after the recording of the video. He didn't play drums on it because he was far too ill, but he did sing in the a cappella section though. And I do think it's a fitting farewell to their drummer of over a decade, and my personal favorite Kiss drummer. Even though I'm not really huge on the song myself, to be honest, it's kinda hokey and gets under my skin, but hey, at the same time, they could have definitely done worse. Now, Animalize is a funny little album. It's the start of Gene being really apathetic about Kiss, which meant the lion's share of the work was on Paul's shoulders. Because at the time, Gene was focusing on becoming a movie star, which was, interesting, to say the least. Yeah! But also because this is the only Kiss album to feature Mark St. John, by far the most brief member of Kiss, only playing on this one album and playing 2 full shows and half of one show if I'm not mistaken. Afterwards, he left because he developed reactive arthritis, which causes swelling in the arms and hands, which made it very difficult for him to play guitar, and he has unfortunately since passed, and I hate to speak ill of the dead, but damn, this guy was not that good. Apparently he had trouble playing the same thing twice. Paul apparently had to dub parts of his solos for them to work better with the songs. Now I hate to use the word wanky, because I think it's used incorrectly by a bunch of people just to describe fast playing they don't like. But his playing? Yeah, it's wacky as fuck. Now sure, it's fast, but there's really nothing else to his playing. It's not memorable at all, you forget it a second later, and his tone is also really bad. So I'm glad his tenure in Kiss was short-lived. But the album definitely has its share of gems. I've Had Enough, Into the Fire is scorching, Heaven's on Fire and Thrills in the Night are great commercial hard rock affairs, Under the Gun is pretty much speed metal, and While the City Sleeps is a pretty good Gene song for this era. But most of the rest of the album is boring, almost bluesy hard rock that is really forgettable, like Lonely's the Hunter and Murder in High Heels, so it's kind of an uneven record. But the good stuff is really good and definitely worth hearing. Unmasked is pretty much a straight up pop record. Sure, there's some rock-based riffs here or there, a little bit of crunchy guitars and stuff, but the melodies are very in your face and the vocals are very high in the mix. I've heard some people try and call it power pop. Now I can kinda get that, but the album isn't very powerful at all. It's fairly restrained. Cheap Trick is a great example of a power pop band because even though there's gorgeous hooks that sound sublime, they still fly off the rails at times and can be very aggressive when need be. And this album never really does that. In fact, the only time I would say the album sounds pure power pop is during my personal favorite track of the album, Tomorrow. This album was made during a very troubling time in Kiss's history. Peter Criss never showed up to the studio to record, so Anton Fig of David Letterman fame filled in on drums, just like with Dynasty a year prior. So you could argue that the album was made by a glorified three-piece, because even Dynasty had at least one song that featured Peter Criss. And I do wish there was at least one song that featured Peter, because I do love his voice. But with that being said, this album is still a pretty enjoyable listen. Sure, there's some turds like Torpedo Girl and You're All That I Want, but highlights like Is That You, Shandy, and Naked City with their bubblegum pop goodness will make you forget all about those less than stellar tracks. Asylum is kind of an underrated record because everyone looks at the album cover and what they look like at the time and watch the videos and they're horrified because they don't exactly look promising. This is definitely the worst album cover they ever did and it's the worst costumes they ever wore, so people assume the music sucks as well. But it doesn't at all. It's actually really damn solid for mid-80s glam / hair metal, whatever you want to call it. Now, it's by no means a peerless classic, it's pretty dated and there's some filler to be found, but make no mistake, this album contains some of the best shit Kiss have done since the 70s, including King of the Mountain, which crushes and sounds majestic, Secretly Cruel, which is kinda filler but still really enjoyable, and Who Wants to Be Lonely and All Night are as catchy as they are fucking cheesy, and I love me some good cheese. But definitely the standout is the lead single, Tears Are Falling. Without a doubt one of the best things this band ever did throughout their nearly 5-decade-long career. A song that's actually kind of outside the box for that era. There's nothing that came out at that time which you could say sounds a lot like it. It's not quite a power ballad, but it's also not quite a full-bore rocker either. It also includes by far the best solo of Bruce Kulick's career. So don't judge this album by its cover. It's not bad at all. Now I have copped a good amount of shit for defending Psycho Circus. And I can't pretend I don't understand why. This was supposed to be the comeback album of Kiss with all 4 original members that recorded some of the finest rock music of all time. This album was supposed to be Kiss doing what they do best with the classic lineup, but instead we got a musical clusterfuck with 2/4 of the band hardly even participating. The reasoning for Peter and Ace having limited involvement changes depending on who you ask.
Psycho Circus, I had very limited involvement. I wasn't invited to the studio. When you hear Paul and Gene talk about it, it's like I didn't show up or, The reason I'm not on any of the songs is because I wasn't asked to be on them, whereas they try to make it look like I was absent.
But regardless of the he said, she said bullshit, we have a Kiss reunion record that is barely a reunion record. Ace only plays guitar on one track, Peter only plays drums on one track, everyone in the band sings on You Want It the Best, which is actually pretty good even though it's got enough cheese to open up its own pizzeria. And Peter also sings on maybe my least favorite Kiss song of all time, I Finally Found My Way to You. A terrible, sappy, saccharine ballad that is a horrible retread of Beth. Every time I hear it, I just want to jump out the fucking window. In fact, the only song the entire band plays on is the Fraley Pen song Into the Void. It's catchy, has great guitar work, and actually reminds me of old school Kiss.
Well, imagine my shock.
And despite the album hardly sounding like Kiss at times, and the fact that the fans were pretty much sold a lie, I think the album is pretty damn good for the most part. The title track is a classic the band still plays live to this day. Within is a weird song that goes all over the place. We Are One is kind of a sappy yet surprisingly pleasant ballad. And Journey of a Thousand Years is a sprawling epic that is definitely my favorite off the record. Now your mileage may vary on this album, but I'd recommend you go into it with an open mind and you might be surprised.
Bottle. Girl, you know you ought to treat me good. Rock bottle.
Dress to Kill is the sound of desperation. They recorded 2 studio records that failed to sell, so much so that Neil Bogart, the president of Casablanca Records, had to produce this album because they just didn't have enough money to hire a proper producer. And it doesn't quite work, and you could tell Bogart was really out of his element because I would say this is one of the worst produced Kiss records. It sounds very dry and there isn't much power behind the songs, but at the same time, Dress to Kill has a charm that you can't help but love. Some of it reminds me of the New York Dolls, and it has almost a proto-punk vibe to some of the tracks. The band was so strapped for material that when they went in to record the album, they were writing some of the tracks in the studio. And the songs Love Her All I Can and She are actually re-recordings of songs from the old Wicked Lester days. And if you listen to the original versions, it's a 9-day difference, and the Kiss versions are improvements over the original in every single way. Anything for My Baby is bouncy and is one of my personal favorites. Rock Bottom is impactful and has tons of energy. And Come On and Love Me is my favorite off the album, with more hooks than you can even count. Though I'll be honest, I'm not huge on tracks like Room Service and Ladies in Waiting. They just come across as filler to me. They're by no means bad, but they're not exactly A material, in my opinion. Rock and Roll All Night has been played to hell and back, and I've heard it way more times than I can even remember. But there's a reason why it's so overplayed. It's a stone cold classic that's unforgettable. Say what you want about the song, but I guarantee you can sing along to the chorus word for word. Love Gun might just be the band at the height of their raw spectacle. They had the biggest and best stage show yet, arguably the best album cover, and one of the most defining albums of their entire career. It also has my favorite Kiss producer Eddie Kramer on it, so it sounds perfect. It's the first Kiss album to feature Ace on vocals as well. He was always too nervous to sing on prior albums, so songs he had written like Cold Gin and Strange Ways would end up being sung by Gene and Peter respectively. And what a song to introduce yourself with Shock Me. Inspired by an event in North Carolina when Ace was shocked by a poorly grounded metal railing. It's catchy, includes one of Ace's greatest solos of all time. It's the best track of the album. What else can I say? I Stole Your Love opens up the album with a punch to the gut. Christine 16 is a pretty unique song for Kiss with a great solo written by none other than Eddie Van Halen himself. The title track is quintessential Kiss that encompasses everything great about them, and on top of that, he's singing about his dick.
See, Ronnie, his dick is the gun.
Even filler tracks like Tomorrow and Tonight and Got Love for Sale are also really enjoyable. And Then She Kissed Me might also just be the gayest song I've ever heard, ever. And I've listened to my fair share of queercore, mind you. But I guess I'm a raging homo because I dig the song a fair bit. Love Gun might not be the most solid record Kiss ever put out, but it's arguably the most iconic. Destroyer is considered the Kiss album, along with Alive. Most Kiss fans will tell you that this is their favorite album and the best thing they ever did, and they've never topped it. But if I have to be honest, I have to say the album is slightly overrated. It isn't bad at all, don't misread me. For the love of God, no, it's great still. But it is far from their best. It was made with Alice Cooper producer Bob Ezrin, and with all due respect, it's no Killer Welcome to My Nightmare. I feel it can get kind of pretentious at times, like with the opening of the album with the car crash, and the just plain bizarre final track, Rock and Roll Party. What the fuck is this noise? It's missing the primal nature of the earlier records and replaces it with a bombastic flair that soaks up nearly every track, but it does definitely fall flat on the soft, cornball ballad Great Expectations, by far the worst thing they did in the 70s. And listening to the instrumental, you might think it's a heartfelt song, but it's actually weirdly sexual and it does not fit the music at all. And the children's choir makes me want to stick my dick in a fucking pencil sharpener every single time I hear it. But damn near every other track is classic. Detroit Rock City, King of the Nighttime World, Shout It Out Loud. Most Kiss set lists usually feature at least half of this track listing, put it that way. We have Beth, the biggest hit of the band's career, a beautiful emotional ballad written by drummer Peter Criss, a song of the rest of the band didn't even think stood a chance. And my favorite song is definitely the catchiest Cholera, Do You Love Me? With classic lines such as,
You like my 7-inch leather heel.
Thanks Paul, I definitely need to know the length of your cock, it was really keeping me up at night. Thanks for having me back. The Elder is by far the most controversial Kiss album of all time. The only thing it shares with other Kiss records is the members in the band, and that's about it. After the Unmasked tour, Kiss's popularity was beginning to seriously wane. They were doing well in Europe and Australia, but the US was a different story. They didn't even tour the US for Unmasked, and they only played a single show at the Palladium in New York due to Unmasked's poor US sales. The band were at first going to go back to their roots and record a proper hard rock album, but Bob Ezrin, hot off producing Pink Floyd's The Wall, got involved, and him along with manager Bill Aucoin convinced the band to try something different. And something different they tried. Bob saw a short story that Gene wrote called The Elder and convinced them to make a concept album around it. Much to the chagrin of Ace Frehley. During recording of the album, Ace stayed at his house and literally mailed in his parts to the studio. That's how little he gave a shit. And Eric Carr had just joined the band at this point, and he was not exactly on board. He thought it was a terrible mistake for Kiss to do this. And it was. It bombed big time and didn't even go gold. And the band didn't even tour for this album. They only did some TV appearances and recorded one video for the song World Without Heroes. And this album has a reputation as a terrible album and the worst Kiss album, and I wholeheartedly disagree. Sure, it's not Kiss, and it's weird as fuck, but I think it's really good for what it is. There's the maiden-like gallop of The Oath, the bombastic, sporadic, dark lights, the beautiful ballads Just a Boy and the aforementioned World Without Heroes, and it even gets kind of progressive at times with Only You. But my favorite cut of this album has got to be the fantastical and downright bizarre Under the Rose. Now as for the rest of the album, another time. Now Kiss's debut is an essential record. It has so many classic cuts and it reads like a greatest hits. Sure, the production isn't perfect, but this is a hard rock album, not a disco LP. Imperfection is almost the name of the game. The early Kiss records are often called heavy metal Beatles, and when you listen to tracks like Nothing to Lose, it's pretty damn hard to argue. There's something about not only this album, but also all the records prior to Alive. It just has a primal nature to it that I can't quite put my finger on. The opening track, Strutter, is a Stone Cold classic that I absolutely adore, but as much as I love it, Deuce would have been a far better opener for not just the album, but the band's career as a whole. It has everything great about Kiss wrapped up into one great song. It has amazing riffs to drive the track, Gene's performance is full of piss and vinegar, and is one of the best guitar solos ever captured on a Kiss record. Cold Gin might just be the greatest drinking song of all time, and is definitely on the playlist whenever I crack open a cold one with the boys. 100,000 Years has a bass line that punishes and builds the song until it climaxes in the chorus, and Black Diamond might just be one of the best Kiss songs ever. The juxtaposition of Paul's crooning intro to Peter's batshit insane screams for the rest of the song is legendary, and it's probably the stairway to heaven of the band's career. And no song is bad. Sure, Kissing Time's chorus is kind of forgettable, but the rest of the song slaps. And even Love Theme from Kiss isn't terrible for what it is. With classic track after classic track, you really can't go wrong with the debut Kiss LP. Now we finally have the best non-makeup Kiss record. It's actually a very similar album to Creatures of the Night, the album that preceded it. Same lineup, same producer, Michael James Jackson, and has the same kind of 80s trad metal vibe. And it's actually really underrated, and hardly anyone ever talks about it like how Creatures of the Night is talked about. Which is actually pretty funny because Lick It Up sold way more copies than Creatures of the Night, thanks to the title track, which was a huge hit for the band. But that title track is also the reason why this album is not viewed in the same light as Creatures. And that's mainly because people listen to the title track and assume the rest of the album is like that, and they never give the album a shot. Which is a damn shame because this album boasts some of Kiss's heaviest and best tracks of all time. The title track may be a cheesy and catchy hard rock song, but it really doesn't represent the album at all. Don't get me wrong, I love the title track as well, but I like all the other tracks much more. For example, the Dynamite opener Exciter, the dark and gross sounding Not For The Innocent, the Speedball jam Young and Wasted that'll wreck your senses, and probably my favorite song is the power ballad A Million to One. It's anthemic and makes you want to put your fist in the air and sing along. In my opinion, it should have been a single because I could see this getting pretty big, especially in that era. And the second single, All Hell's Breaking Loose, is actually an early example of rap rock or rap metal, before there was ever a name for it and before nu metal ever came about. And it's kind of ridiculous, but I can't help but love it. And Paul Stanley may not exactly be Chuck D, but he isn't Debbie Harry either, so give him credit where it's due. Hotter Than Hell is plain and simply a bad sounding record. It's not even subjective, really. Crazy Nights, as much as I dislike the sound, it was at least done on purpose. This album, not so much. Hotter Than Hell sounds like it was recorded in a McDonald's bathroom, but I'll be damned if I don't dig it. Sure, it sounds really bad, but I think that kind of adds to the album. It gives it a weird, sludgy, and swampy vibe to the entire record that I can't help but love. This production, combined with the really heavy tracks like Parasite, Watching You, and Strange Ways, it's no wonder that this album has such a big influence on so many sludge and stoner metal bands. And as bad as it sounds, it has an undeniable charm to it. And it even works with some of the more commercial songs like Got to Choose or All the Way. They still sound great even though the production is almost working against them. And the sound gives every riff an extra level of thickness that makes the album sound huge. Going Blind is maybe the greatest Kiss ballad ever written. It's dour, dark, depressing with bizarre lyrics that actually make you think for once on a Kiss record. It is without a doubt my favorite song on the album. The title track has a really strange guitar solo that sounds like two solos being played at once, and it's a weird risk that actually pays off surprisingly well, and I wish they would do weird stuff like that way more often. Least favorite tracks are Mainline and Coming Home, which I think are the only examples where the production kind of smothered the songs, but they're still good tracks, don't get me wrong. Overall, it's one of the weirder Kiss offerings, but it's also one of my absolute favorites.
The best I've had, making love, making love, making love. I'm not no making love.
Now, when Destroyer initially came out, it was not heralded as a classic record like it is seen today. Instead, the fans kinda hated it, and I think I can see why. When you listen to the first three albums and even the first Alive record, they're kind of, well, I don't want to say simple, but they are primitive. It's music for teenagers who wanted to piss off their parents, so I could see why Destroyer of all records might go over their heads. And Rock and Roll Over was meant as a correction to go back to the grit and bite of the first three albums, and it's objectively even better, mainly due to the amazing production by Eddie Kramer. Before this, he had engineered classic records for Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, and even worked with the Beatles and the Stones. so it's safe to say the band were in good hands. The album is basically the first 3 records, but everything is amplified. First off, they just plain simple sound better, and the band have vastly improved on their instruments. And the songwriting has also been stepped up. There's power in these songs that are arguably absent from previous albums, and it's a very welcome addition. I Want You grabs you by the lapel with its intensity and is one of the best hard rock songs of the 70s. Calling Dr. Love, Love 'Em and Leave 'Em, and Ladies Room are examples of great womanizing Gene songs. Mr. Speed has a riff to die for. Making Love features a performance from Paul that reminds me why he's my favorite member of the band. But perhaps my favorite song for the album is the ballad originally written for Rod Stewart and eventually sung by Peter Criss, Hard Luck Woman. And as much as I love Beth, this song destroys Beth badly. And in a just world, it would be a #1 hit and it'll be played on classic rock radio even to this day. But it says Kiss on it, so that would never happen. And even lesser tracks like Baby Driver and See in Your Dreams are really solid. It's just a classic record through and through.
A magic touch. A magic touch.
But Dynasty is a disco album. Eat a dick, motherfucker, because Dynasty is one of the best Kiss records, disco be damned. And hey, disco is inherently a fun genre, and Kiss is an inherently fun band, so it kinda fits. And fuck you guys who are set in their ways. Disco is fucking great. We respect disco in this house. Talking about disco in a fucking Bathory shirt, Jesus Christ. And even then, there's actually very little disco to be found on this album. Don't like disco? Just skip the first track and you're in the clear and they're in for another solid hard rock record. But this time with some disco, pop, and even dance affectations sprinkled throughout. Another reason why people really hate this album is because this was, for all intents and purposes, the end of classic Kiss. Peter Criss, even though he was on the cover, he did not play on the album, barring one song, and the rest of the record was handled by Anton Fig. The reasoning for this is that Vinnie Poncia, the producer, deemed Peter's drumming substandard after he was in a car accident, which I know kinda sucks, but Anton Fig is no slouch, and when I listen to this album, I'm sorry, but I barely miss Peter at all, as much as I love his jazzy drumming. But the one song he plays on, Dirty Living, is basically what his solo album should have sounded like. It's driving disco with a hard rock twist. I Was Made for Loving You will forever be a classic piece of disco, and you can die mad about it. 2000 Man is a Stones cover that destroys the original. Sure Know Something is carried by without a doubt Gene's best bass line, and it culminates in an explosive chorus. And it was one of my favorite Kiss songs for many years, ever since I was a dumb little kid. Gene's songs, Charisma and X-Ray Eyes, you could argue are kind of filler, but even then they're still catchy and they'll stick in your head just as much as every other track. Ace's songs, Hard Times and Save Your Love are hard-rocking jams, but my favorite track has got to be the Paul Stanley-dominated Magic Touch. This album is low-key a masterpiece. You wouldn't expect it, but it really is. Okay, I think we all knew this album would be #1. I mean, how could it not be? This album is perfection, and it has such a powerful Chad energy to it. It decimates all within its path. They wrote this album right after The Elder bombed, so they were at an all-time low. And when a good band worth their salt are put in such a situation, they nearly always deliver. And this album is no exception. It has maybe the best drum sound I've ever heard on any record ever. I don't know if it's just the engineering or Carr beating the shit out of his kit or a mixture of both, but I mean, just listen to this. It features Vinnie Vincent, and I say this with all due respect to Bruce Kulick, but Vinnie is without a doubt the best Kiss guitarist behind Ace Frehley. Say what you want about the guy, he's a notorious asshole, probably more so than even Gene, but his contributions to Kiss is arguably what saved the band, and you can't take that away from him. The title track might just be my favorite Kiss song of all time. It's ferocious, it melts faces off, but it's still very catchy and anthemic. Same thing goes for the single, I Love It Loud. The chant will never fail to hit my soul. Keep Me Coming is a Zeppelin worship song, yet it manages to be better than most Zeppelin songs. You're damn right I said it. Danger and Killer are both as catchy as they are vicious. I Still Love You is a power ballad with some real power behind it, and it crushes every other power ballad of the 80s. including the other ones made by Kiss. Rock and Roll Hell is dystopian and sounds almost post-apocalyptic, and there's some rumors that Gene wrote it about Ace, which makes it even more puzzling when Ace covered it years later, even though he didn't even play on it, despite his face being on the album cover. And the song even has a co-writing credit from Bryan Adams of all people. Which, I don't even know what to say about that. And another song that has a co-writing credit from Mr. Adams is the immortal classic War Machine. It's the standout along with the title track. It's punishing and it'll split you in two. I mean, I could go on about this album forever. I love it so much. It's an absolute masterpiece in every sense of the word. I mean, everybody loves this album, even... Fuck you! If you hate Kiss and everything they stand for, first off, how do you even make it through this entire video? What the... This album might just be the one to change your mind. It's that good. Overall, Kiss, as much as I've grown to despise them in recent years due to several reasons, but the reason I care so much about Gene being a fucking idiot or Paul being a crotchety old man is because I care a great deal about this band. And whenever I listen to the good shit they've released in their 40+ year career, I'm instantly transported back to my childhood, and I remember why they had such a big impact on me. I mean, they introduced me to music. I don't remember life before knowing of Kiss. They're the reason I play guitar, they're the reason I play bass, they're the reason I'm the person I am today. For better or for worse. Sure, my palette has greatly expanded over the years, but I cannot shake this band from me no matter what I do. They mean a lot to me. And they even mean a lot to my parents, for God's sake. That's the power this band has over not just me, but my entire family. They were my first concert, my first favorite band, my first everything. Fuck, I probably lost my virginity to this band as well. So with all that being said, listen to some Kiss today. Peace out, party people. Oh yeah, I forgot, I also own this.